The Dawn fleet moved through the dark side of the galaxy like a whisper carried by the wind. The stars looked cold, but every human heart burned warm with purpose. The fleet had grown stronger after Meridian 3. More colonies had joined them, and new ships had been built from the ruins of old ones. Every vessel carried the mark of Earth painted on its hull. Every crew knew what they were fighting for. Jack Carter stood on the bridge of the Horizon Dawn, watching the endless space ahead. He knew the Council and the Dominion were preparing their response. He knew the calm would not last long. Laura Bennett came beside him and said the scouts report heavy movement near the border worlds. Jack nodded and said, "Then the storm is coming and we will be ready." Far away in the shining halls of the Galactic Council, the members argued once again. The Dominion representative shouted for war and claimed that humans were a danger to peace. The elder of the Karen tried to speak reason, but his voice was drowned out. He said, "If you push the humans, they will push back harder. They have done it before." He looked around, but no one listened. The Council voted and decided to allow the Dominion to lead an operation to end the human threat. The fleets of many worlds gathered under the Dominion flag. They called it Operation Silence. Their goal was to wipe out the Dawn fleet once and for all. Jack received reports from their spies inside the Council. He knew a great attack was coming. He called all captains for a meeting through the secure line. Faces filled the screen, each one tired but determined. Jack said, "We are outnumbered and outgunned, but that has never stopped us before." Laura said, "If we run, they will find us again and again. We fight here and we show them that Earth still stands in us." No one objected. They all agreed that this would be the battle that decided everything. The Dawn fleet gathered near a dead star where the gravity fields could hide their movements. Engineers worked day and night to prepare the ships. Weapons were checked and rechecked. Old technology was fused with new ideas. Human creativity turned scraps into shields and engines into weapons. The crews trained until their bodies ached. Jack walked among them and spoke softly. He told them about the old wars on Earth and how humans had always survived the impossible. He said, "Remember who you are and what you carry. You are the voice of a world that never gave up." As the day of battle came closer, the Dominion Armada entered the sector. Thousands of ships formed a wall of metal and fire. Their leader, Admiral Threck, sent a message to the humans. He said, "Surrender and you may live as prisoners." Jack answered with calm words. He said, "We are the people of Earth and we do not kneel." The channel closed and silence fell. Then the stars lit up with the light of engines as the human fleet advanced. The battle began without warning. Missiles and plasma tore through the void. The human ships moved fast, using the dead star's gravity to hide their positions. The Dominion fired blindly into the shadows. Laura commanded the Horizon Dawn with perfect control. Her voice was steady as she gave orders. She said, "Aim for their engines and strike when they open their shields." The crew obeyed without fear. One by one, Dominion cruisers exploded into flames. The humans fought like a storm that could not be stopped. Jack led a smaller group of ships through a narrow passage between two debris fields. He used the old tactics of Earth's naval wars to outmaneuver the enemy. Every explosion lit the sky like a sunrise. The Dominion admiral shouted for reinforcements, but confusion spread through his ranks. The humans attacked from every direction. They were fewer in number, but their strikes were precise and their will unbroken. The battle lasted for hours. The void became a field of fire. On the ground of a nearby moon, human marines landed to destroy Dominion communication relays. Laura coordinated them from orbit. The ground teams fought fiercely. The air was filled with dust and light. Jack's shuttle landed near the front lines to assist. He moved through smoke and chaos with calm steps. His presence gave courage to everyone who saw him. When they destroyed the final relay, the Dominion fleet lost contact with their command. The human ships took the chance and pushed forward. The Dominion flagship turned its guns toward the Horizon Dawn. The blast shook the hull, but Laura refused to retreat. She ordered all power to the main cannon. The ship fired and the beam cut through the enemy armor. The flagship broke apart and burned into the star's light. Cheers filled every human ship. The enemy began to fall back. The silence that followed was heavy and full of meaning. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had defeated a fleet that was meant to erase them. After the battle, the humans gathered their wounded and counted their losses. Many ships were damaged and many lives were gone, but they had survived. Jack stood on the deck looking at the wreckage of enemy ships drifting through space. He said quietly, "They thought we were a memory, but now we are a warning." Laura joined him and said, "We showed them that humanity's fire still burns." Jack nodded and said, "This is not the end. The Council will not stop now. They will try to control us, but we will not let them. In the following days, the Council met again. The news of the defeat shook them. Some demanded peace and others demanded vengeance. The elder of the Karen stood once more and said, "You cannot kill an idea, and humanity is an idea that will not die." His words echoed through the chamber and no one could answer him. The Dawn fleet began to rebuild once again. They rescued survivors from other battles and repaired their ships using what they could salvage. Jack sent messages to every corner of space calling humans to return home. The word home had a new meaning now. It was not a place but a people. Laura oversaw the construction of new ships built from old wrecks. The crews worked without rest. The dream of Earth had become their strength. Each night Jack went to the observation deck and looked at the stars. He thought of the journey that began with one message sent from a dying relay. He thought of all the faces lost and all the voices that had joined since. He whispered to himself that the galaxy will remember us now. Laura often stood beside him in silence. They did not need to speak. The stars told them that the fight was not over, but the path was clear. Humanity had risen again, and the universe would never forget it. Months passed after the great battle, and the galaxy was not the same anymore. The news of the human victory spread faster than light itself. Worlds that had once mocked Earth now whispered the name of humanity with both fear and respect. The Galactic Council tried to hide the truth, but the people already knew. The image of human ships standing tall against the Dominion fleet had become a symbol for all those who lived under oppression. The Council could no longer control the story. The truth had escaped into the stars, and it could not be silenced. Jack Carter spent his days repairing what was left of the fleet. The Horizon Dawn floated above a red dwarf star serving as their temporary base. Engineers worked around the clock, patching holes and rebuilding systems. The ships carried scars from the last battle, but those scars had become badges of honor. Laura Bennett moved through the hangar with calm eyes, giving orders and helping wherever she could. Every person there felt her presence like a steady heartbeat that kept them together. One evening, Jack gathered the crew in the central hall. He stood on the platform with the faint light of the star glowing behind him. His voice was low, but everyone could hear him. He said, "We stood against a storm that was meant to end us, and we did not fall." He looked around at the faces of men and women from every corner of Earth. He said, "We fight not because we love war, but because we love peace and freedom, and we will not let anyone take that from us again." The hall filled with a quiet strength that words could not describe, but far away the Dominion had not forgotten their humiliation. Admiral Threx had survived the destruction of his flagship. He now sat in a dark chamber on a distant moon surrounded by his remaining officers. His pride burned like fire, and his hatred for humans grew with every breath. He swore to rebuild his fleet and destroy the Dawn fleet once and for all. He sent secret messages to mercenaries and smugglers offering riches to anyone who could bring him information about the humans. Slowly and silently, a shadow began to form around the edges of human space. Jack and Laura were aware of the danger. They had learned long ago that victory only gives a short rest. Laura said, "We can't stay hidden forever, they will come again, and this time harder." Jack nodded and said, "Then we meet them again, and we make sure they understand that humanity does not bow twice." He sent out ships to find allies among the free worlds. Many had once feared to help humans, but now they saw a chance for change. Small fleets joined the humans, bringing supplies and weapons. The Dawn fleet became not just a human fleet, but a symbol of unity for those who still believed in freedom. As the alliance grew, so did hope. New worlds offered their ports and factories. Children on distant planets drew pictures of Earth and dreamed of visiting it one day, even though Earth itself was still broken and quiet. It had become a legend, a lost home that lived only in stories and songs. Jack looked at the blue and white flag they carried and said, "One day we will go home, not to remember what was lost, but to rebuild what will come next." The peace did not last. One night, the sensors picked up strange signals near the outer colonies. Ships went missing. Stations were found empty. Then came the attack. The Dominion's rebuilt armada struck without warning. They had learned from their last defeat. They used stealth technology and hit from the shadows. The first colonies fell before the humans could respond. The Dawn fleet gathered again to defend what they had built. The sky filled with fire once more. The battle that followed was unlike any before. The Dominion brought in machines that could tear through shields and drones that moved like swarms of metal insects. The humans fought with courage, but they were pushed back. Ships exploded one after another. The screams of comrades echoed through the channels. Jack ordered a retreat to regroup. The Horizon Dawn was damaged and half of its engines were gone. Laura took the controls herself and kept the ship alive through sheer will. They escaped into a nebula where the enemy sensors could not follow. Inside the nebula, the survivors gathered. The fleet was smaller now and morale was breaking. Jack looked at the tired faces and knew they could not fight forever. He walked to the observation deck and stared into the swirling lights of the nebula. Laura joined him and said, "Maybe this is where it ends." Jack shook his head and said, "No, this is where it begins again." He remembered the first time he looked up at the sky as a boy on Earth and dreamed of the stars. He said, "We came out here because we wanted to explore, not to conquer. We wanted to build bridges, but they forced us to build walls. If we fall here, then everything we stood for dies with us." He gathered the captains once more and said, "We make our stand at Vega's edge. It is close enough to the trade routes to send a message to every system. We fight there, and no matter what happens, they will know that humanity does not surrender." The fleet moved through the nebula like ghosts heading toward Vega's edge. The Dominion followed close behind, thinking it was the final chase. The last battle began under the light of a dying star. The Horizon Dawn stood at the center with all remaining ships around it. Jack and Laura worked side by side, giving orders as the enemy approached. The first wave hit like a hammer. Ships shattered. Shields failed. But the humans kept fighting. Every laser, every missile carried their defiance. Jack called for all remaining ships to form a circle around the Horizon Dawn. He said, "This is our line and we hold it till the end." The Dominion pushed harder. Their admiral believed victory was certain. But then something unexpected happened. Across the galaxy, thousands of civilian ships began to move. Miners, traders, and even scavengers had heard the distress calls. They came not for glory, but because they believed in the humans who had once stood for them. The sky filled with countless lights as small ships joined the battle. The Dominion was caught off guard. Their formations broke as the combined fire of hundreds of small vessels hit them from every side. Laura looked at the screens with disbelief and said, "They came for us." Jack smiled for the first time in days and said, "No, they came for what we all stand for." The Horizon Dawn charged its last remaining weapon, a massive plasma beam, powered by the ship's core. Jack gave the order to fire. The beam tore through the Dominion's command ship, ending the battle in a single blinding flash. Silence followed. The Dominion fleet began to scatter. The war was over. After the battle, the surviving ships gathered near the star's fading light. Jack sent a message to every world in the galaxy. His voice carried through every channel. He said, "We are humanity, and we have paid the price for peace in fire and in blood, but we still stand and we will not be erased." His words reached every corner of space, and even the council members listened in silence. The elder of the Karen whispered that the age of fear had ended. The humans did not celebrate with noise or pride. They simply looked at the stars and remembered those who had fallen. Laura stood beside Jack and said, "Do you think the galaxy will ever understand us?" Jack said, "Maybe one day, but even if they don't, we have already done what we came to do." We reminded them that humanity is not a number or a name, it is a force that rises again and again. The Horizon Dawn turned slowly toward the distant light of Earth. It was still far away, but for the first time in a long time it felt closer than ever. And in that silent moment, as the ship drifted through the stars, the galaxy finally understood that Earth had not fallen. It had only been waiting for the right moment to rise again. The Galactic Empire stretched across 1,000 suns and 10,000 worlds, and for countless ages no one dared to challenge it, and no one even dreamed of such madness because the Empire's fleets were huge and their weapons could turn moons to dust, and their leaders spoke with the pride of gods who had forgotten what fear felt like. But all of that changed when the name of a small blue planet whispered through the endless dark for the first time in 1,000 years. They called it Earth. To most of the Empire's citizens, it was just another world, lost on the edge of space, but to a few, it was something strange, something that made old records flicker awake, something that should have been forgotten. The first time the Empire noticed Earth was when their exploration fleet went missing near an uncharted sector. The fleet was commanded by High Captain Veros, and his warships were armed with enough power to burn continents, but when their last signal came through, it was not a call for help, it was a short, trembling message that simply said, "They are watching us," and then silence filled the stars. For weeks, the Empire searched the void and sent New fleets, but every ship that entered that region vanished without trace. Rumors spread like wildfire that some new power had risen beyond the borders, a power that did not speak or trade or threaten, but simply erased anything that came too close. The Emperor himself, a cold being of crystal eyes and iron, sat upon his throne and declared that no one in the galaxy could defy the Empire's will. Yet in secret even he felt unease, for the data fragments recovered from the edge of that dark zone showed something impossible. Ships moving faster than light without engines that the Empire understood. Energy readings beyond any known scale. And in one frame of broken video there was an image of a ship unlike any seen before, smooth silver, like a tear of light moving as if space itself bent to let it pass. The scientists called it an illusion, but deep down they knew it was real. Far away on that quiet blue world, a woman named Laura King stood on the deck of a great vessel that rested high above the clouds. She looked down at the earth below and smiled softly. The world that once fought wars and cried in hunger now shone bright and peaceful. Humanity had come far beyond what even their oldest dreams had once hoped. They had learned how to heal their planet, how to reach the stars not through greed but through unity. They had learned the secrets of energy in the mind and the body, until the line between man and God began to fade. They had seen the truth that power was not in metal or fire but in will and understanding. When the first human ships had left the solar system, the stars had seemed endless, but now those same stars felt small and quiet. Humanity had changed more than any race ever had. Laura was the captain of the Horizon, a ship that could cross galaxies in moments. Around her thousands of ships moved in silent formation, but there was no noise, no engines, just smooth motion through folded space. The crew were calm, not soldiers but explorers. Yet when word came that the Galactic Empire had declared the human frontier a forbidden zone, Laura felt something stir in her chest. She knew it was not hate but memory. Humanity had known oppression once, long ago, when they were weak and divided, when empires of their own had ruled through fear. They had promised never again to kneel before tyrants. The Empire's first message was not a greeting but a command. It said, "You will surrender your technology and swear loyalty to the Emperor." Laura read the words on her screen, and for a long moment she said nothing. Her officers waited, unsure of what she would do. Then she spoke in a voice that was calm but carried weight like the sea before a storm. She said, "We will answer them in our own way." She gave one order: activate presence field. Across the void, the Empire's nearest fleet was preparing to attack. Admiral Corvin sat in his throne of black stone and smiled as he watched his ship spread into formation. He had crushed a dozen rebellions and destroyed entire species who had dared to speak of freedom. When his sensors detected the human fleet, he laughed, for their ships looked too small, too soft, too clean to be dangerous. He ordered his main cannon to fire, but before the command could reach his weapon, the stars vanished. For a heartbeat, the universe went dark. Then light returned and all his ships were gone. Not destroyed, not broken, simply erased from existence as if they had never been. His last thought before the darkness took him was that he had looked into the eyes of something far beyond mortal understanding. When the news reached the capital of the Empire, panic swept through every level of power. The Emperor demanded answers, but none came. Scientists could not explain what had happened. Priests began to whisper that the gods had returned, and in every shadowed corner someone spoke a new word with trembling awe: humans. Laura stood on the bridge of the horizon watching the quiet stars. Her crew sat in silence, each one feeling the same heavy calm that came after great change. She remembered the faces of those on Earth, the children who had once dreamed of touching the stars. They had dreamed of adventure, not war, and yet here they were holding the fate of an entire galaxy in their hands. Laura did not smile, she only whispered to herself, "We came to learn, not to rule, but they will learn what we have become." On the worlds of the Empire, the people began to question their rulers. Stories of human ships made of light, and men who could walk through walls spread faster than fear itself. Some said the humans could see through time, some said they spoke directly to the stars. The truth was simpler. Humanity had learned to master itself, and that mastery looked like magic to those who did not understand. In the dark halls of the Emperor's palace, a council gathered. They argued over what to do. Some said attack, others said pray. One old counselor spoke softly and said, "Perhaps it is time we remember what humility means." The Emperor struck him down in rage, but when night came he could not sleep, because when he closed his eyes he saw that silver ship of light and the human eyes staring back through. The void calm, patient, unafraid. Far away, Laura sent a final message to Earth. she said first. "Contact has been made, they will fear us, but in time they may learn." She stood by the window of her ship and watched a distant sun rise. Humanity had stepped into the galaxy not as conquerors but as something else, something older than war and stronger than fear. The silence around her felt deep and sacred. She whispered, "May we never forget who we were and what we became." And as the horizon drifted through the stars, the light from its hull spread across the dark like dawn after a long night, and every being who saw it felt something new stirring inside them, a memory of awe, a reminder that even gods could be born from dust. The days after the first encounter changed everything across the galaxy, and the quiet fear that had started in the outer systems grew into open panic as messages spread faster than light about ships made of living light and humans who could turn fleets to dust without a sound, and even those who had never heard of Earth began to whisper its name like a warning and like a prayer. In the great halls of the Galactic Empire, the Emperor sat in silence while his generals argued, each shouting a different plan, but no one dared to speak the truth that had begun to form in every heart that they were facing, something far beyond their reach. The Emperor finally raised his hand and the room fell silent, and his voice came out calm and heavy as stone when he said, "Find out what they are and how they did it." Far beyond the empires reached the horizon, and the human fleet moved through the dark between stars with a peace that no other species had ever known. Captain Laura King stood by the wide glass window of her bridge, watching the stars drift like dust in water. She thought of the battle that had not been a battle, the fleet that had been erased not out of hate, but out of necessity. She remembered the faces of her crew after it was over. There was no joy and no pride, only silence. Humanity had become powerful. Yes, but that power was heavier than any chain, because now every action carried the weight of creation and destruction together. Laura turned to her second officer, a young man named Daniel Hayes, whose eyes were calm and kind and who had once been a teacher before joining the fleet. He asked her, "What do we do now?" And she said, "We wait, because they will come again, and they will not stop until they understand or until they destroy themselves trying." Daniel nodded, but his face showed worry. He said, "They fear us, and fear makes people foolish." Laura agreed and said, "That is why we must be patient and careful, because if we act in anger, we will become what we once hated back." On the Empire's capital world, the Emperor had summoned a new advisor, a woman from the Science Council named Mira Talon. She was not afraid like the others. Her eyes were sharp and her mind quick. She studied the broken data left behind by the vanished fleets and whispered to herself, "These readings are not weapons, they are something else." The energy signatures were smooth, not violent, not chaotic. They looked like controlled waves of reality, bending not to destroy but to reshape. She brought her findings to the Emperor and said perhaps they did not mean to attack. Perhaps it was only defense. The Emperor glared at her and said then, "Why did my ships vanish?" And she answered softly, "Because your ships fired first." That night, the Emperor stood on his balcony and looked at the stars. He had ruled for centuries and never once felt small. But now, as he watched the quiet lights far away, he felt a deep chill inside. Somewhere out there were beings who could wipe away his greatest fleets with a thought. And yet they had not come to his world, they had not sent armies or demands. That silence frightened him more than any war ever could. Meanwhile, on the horizon, Laura was speaking with Earth through a shimmering blue screen. The leaders of the New Earth Council listened carefully as she reported what had happened. An older man named Robert Gray, who had been one of the first to work on humanity's new energy systems, asked her, "Do you believe they will try again?" And she said yes, because they cannot, except that something stronger than them exists. Another council member said, "Should we strike first?" And Laura shook her head and said, "No, we must show them that we are not here to rule them, but they will learn that lesson only if we hold our power with restraint." Days passed into weeks, and the Empire's scouts continued to watch from afar, afraid to come closer, but unable to ignore what was happening. Some of the younger officers began to speak of surrender, though no one dared say it too loudly. On one of the Empire's frontier worlds, a small group of soldiers saw something that shook them to the core. A human ship appeared silently above the horizon and landed in a field of silver grass. From it stepped a single man, tall and calm, wearing simple gray clothes. His name was John Carter, and he was a diplomat sent by Laura herself. He walked toward the soldiers with empty hands and said, "I come in peace." The soldiers pointed their weapons at him, but their commander, a tired old alien named Kareth, lowered his rifle. He could feel something in the air around the human like warmth and light, and he could not explain why, but his fear began to fade. John spoke slowly, saying, We did not come to conquer, we only wish to speak. But if you raise your guns, again we will leave and you will never see us. Again, Kareth asked, why do you not destroy us if you can? And John smiled gently and said, because we remember when we were weak too. Those words spread quickly through the outposts, and when they reached the capital, even the Emperor felt his hands tremble. These humans could crush them with ease, yet they offered mercy, and that mercy felt like judgment. Laura watched the reports and felt a quiet relief. Humanity had always been known for its anger, its wars, its hunger for power, but now they were showing something else. The true strength was not in destruction, but in choice. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. Some in the fleet wanted to strike first to ensure safety, but she kept reminding them that fear breeds fear. She told them that every action they took would shape how the galaxy saw them for ages to come. On one silent night, Laura walked alone through the observation deck. The stars outside glowed faint and distant. She remembered her childhood when the world had been broken by war and the sky filled with smoke. She had seen her parents rebuild their home with nothing but hope, and that hope had guided her all her life. Now she stood between two worlds, one of peace and one of fear, and she felt the weight of both pressing on her. She whispered to herself, we must not lose our humanity even if we become gods. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor gathered his council once more. He had not slept for days. He looked at them and said, we cannot win against them and we cannot understand them. What shall we do? No one answered. At last Miratellin stepped forward and said, then, perhaps we should learn from them instead of fighting. The Emperor's eyes burned with pride, but in that moment he felt something crack inside. The idea of learning from lesser beings was poison to him, but deep down he knew it. It was the only way forward. As the human fleet continued to watch silently from the edges of the Empire's space, the people began to change. Some called the humans gods, others called them monsters, but everyone agreed on one thing, that nothing would ever be the same again. And far away on Earth, children looked up at the night sky and dreamed of peace across the stars, not through fear but through understanding. Humanity had stepped beyond limits, and now the galaxy trembled, not because humans had come to destroy, but because they had come to remind every living being of what they could become. The sun of the Empire's capital rose over a world that no longer felt proud. The people in the streets moved in silence, and even the songs of the morning bells sounded hollow for the first time in generations, because the truth had reached them from the edges of space that the humans were real, and that they had defeated the great fleets of the Empire without effort and without war. Many wanted to deny it, but the evidence was too clear, and even the Emperor's own ministers could not hide the fear in their eyes. Rumors said the humans had come not with armies, but with a calm that broke the will of every soldier who faced them, and those who had seen them spoke of light in their eyes and power in their voice, a power that could bend space and matter like clay. In the high halls of the horizon, Laura King stood looking at the stars. Through the clear window and behind her, the officers waited quietly for her orders, but she said nothing for a long time. She was thinking about the Empire, about its people who had never known kindness from their rulers, who had lived under fear and law for so long that they no longer remembered freedom. She knew that if humanity wished to bring peace, they could not just destroy the Empire, they had to show them another way. Daniel Hayes entered the room and said softly, the Empire's envoys have sent a message, they wish to talk. Laura turned her head and said, then we will listen. Far away, the Emperor had made his choice. He had sent his most trusted noble, Lord Avon, with a delegation to speak with the humans. It was not surrender, at least not in words, but it was the first time in the Empire's long history that anyone had sought peace from another race. Avon's ship was old and heavy, but it moved slowly toward the coordinates the humans had given. When he saw the human fleet, his heart began to pound. The ships looked like pieces of light woven into the dark, their forms simple and clean without weapons or armor. Yet the power they carried was beyond imagination. His crew whispered prayers and some bowed their heads, but Avon straightened his shoulders and said, we will not show fear, we will show respect. When his ship was brought inside the human vessel, the silence was deep and strange. The air itself seemed alive. John Carter stood waiting for them. He wore no armor and carried no weapon, his face calm like still water. He greeted them with simple words, welcome aboard, and though his voice was quiet, it filled the room like music. Avon tried to speak, but his voice shook. He said, we come by the order of the Emperor to discuss peace. John looked at him kindly and said, peace is all we ever wanted. They sat together and spoke for hours. Avon expected threats or demands, but there were none. John explained that humanity had grown beyond the need to conquer, that they sought understanding, not control. He said humanity had suffered much in its own history and learned that power without wisdom destroys itself. Avon listened, and for the first time in his life he felt hope, not fear. When the meeting ended, Avon asked one last question. He said, "What do you wish from us?" John smiled and said nothing but truth and respect. Avon bowed his head and said, "Then perhaps our time of pride is ending." When he returned to the capital, the Emperor listened to his report in silence. The words that humans spoke did not sound like those of conquerors, but like teachers. Yet the Emperor could not believe that anyone with such power would truly be content with peace. His fear grew in silence, and fear soon turned to anger. Days later, the Emperor ordered new weapons to be built. He commanded his scientists to study the strange energy readings from the vanished fleets. He said, "If they can do it, then so can we." Mira Tellin protested, saying, "We cannot match what we do not understand, and if we try, we may destroy ourselves," but he did not listen. Pride was stronger than reason. Back on the horizon, Laura received reports of massive energy tests in the Empire's core worlds. She knew what it meant, and her heart grew heavy. She gathered her officers and said, "The Emperor is afraid he will try to build something to match us. And in doing so, he may break the balance of the stars." Daniel said, "Then we must stop him," and Laura replied, "Yes, but not with force. We will show him what fear truly means." A week later, the Empire tested its new weapon, a vast engine built to open space itself and control it. For a moment, the sky above their capital glowed red and then turned black. Entire cities lost power, and the stars vanished behind a curtain of dark matter. The experiment collapsed, and millions died in silence. When the horizon arrived, the planet looked wounded and broken. Laura stood in orbit, watching the burning world, and whispered, "They did this to themselves." Daniel asked, "Shall we help them?" And she said yes, because mercy is the only lesson that can save them now. The humans descended in their ships of light and began to repair what they could. They healed the atmosphere, rebuilt the power grids, and brought medicine to the sick. The people of the Empire watched with awe and shame as beings of flesh and blood moved through fire and ruin, restoring what pride had destroyed. On the ground, a small child reached out to touch a human's hand and said, "Are you angels?" The human smiled and said, "No, we are what you can be." When the Emperor saw what was happening, he fell to his knees, not from defeat, but from understanding. He had seen gods destroy and rule, but never to heal. For the first time, he saw power used not for domination, but for kindness. He sent a message to Laura saying, "I see now that I was blind." She answered with simple words, "We all were once." As weeks passed, the Empire began to change. Old laws were broken. Slaves were freed. Worlds that had once lived in fear began to speak to each other as equals. Humanity did not stay to rule. They left teachers and builders and then moved on to the next corner of the galaxy where fear still lived. Laura stood once more on the bridge of the horizon and looked back at the Empire's sun rising again, bright and alive. She said softly, "They will remember, not our power but our mercy," and Daniel smiled and said, "That is how it should be." In the quiet that followed, humanity continued its journey. Across the stars, not as conquerors but as reminders that strength without compassion is nothing. The name of Earth became legend, and across the worlds of the former Empire songs were sung of the day when the gods from the blue world came not to bring war but to teach what peace truly meant. And in every story there was a single truth, that the most powerful beings in the galaxy were not those who ruled, but those who remembered how to forgive.